Welcome to A Slob Comes Clean, the podcast. I'm Dana K. White. I blog over at aslobcomesclean.com. That's where I share my personal deslobification process. As I figure out ways to keep my own home under control, I share the truth about cleaning and organizing strategies that actually work in real life for real people. People who don't love cleaning and organizing. Thanks for joining me today. This is podcast number 265, and I think I'm going to call it keyword : start. Yeah. So I'm answering more questions from my super secret Facebook group. You can find out how to join that. That's a perk of being a patron of the show. You can go to patreon.com/A Slob Comes Clean. Anyway, so I had answered questions last week and basically put the ones together that all ended with the answer is the 5-minute pickup. And it's funny to me because so I don't always listen to my own podcast, but I listened to that one and it was really good. Anyway, but somebody had emailed and said that they had seen the title and they were like, I know what a 5-minute pickup is and it doesn't make any difference in my house. And so I'm not going to listen to that one. But then for some reason it auto-played, which you should all subscribe so that it auto-plays. Anyway, I have to tell a story about that really quickly. Anyway, but she listened to it and she was like, oh my word, that's what I've been doing wrong with the 5-minute pickup, and it helped her. And she didn't actually say, oh my word. But anyway, that's the general gist of the email that I'm not actually reading word for word. But basically it was helpful for her, even though she wasn't for sure it was going to be helpful. So here's the story about auto playing. I have like some of my daughter's music is on my phone, from back before she had a phone. And so it drives me banana. I mean, the weirdest things will just randomly play. I'm going, I was in the middle of listening to a podcast and I get into my car, it hooks up to Bluetooth, and suddenly it starts playing some boy band. And I'm like, oh my word. Anyway, so my husband went camping with one of his friends and our sons, and they got into our friend's truck and he plugged in his phone. My husband plugged in his phone in his friend's truck to do this is a totally random story, to charge his phone. Well, his car is fancier than ours, and that meant that it actually hooked up the USB and it started playing a song, and they were like, what is this? It started playing the soundtrack to Les Mis. My husband loves the soundtrack to Les Mis. So on this like guys camping trip, that's what started blaring out of the speakers, and it was just hilarious and it makes me laugh. But anyway, that was a super random story. I'm so glad you're still here. Anyway, before I get going on answering these questions that the answer has something to do with keyword start, or at least some of them do. All right, so keyword is start. So again, these are questions. They knew that these were for the podcast. All inflections are my own, and sometimes you might get a glimpse of what my answer is going to be by my inflections. Anyway, you'll see. Okay. Y'all are used to me being sassy. So nobody's going to like ask a question and think, I can't believe she was sassy in her answer to my question, right? I hope. I'm so sorry. If anybody's offended, I just apologize. Anyway. Okay. So here we go. Here's the first question. How do I start decluttering for a move when I'm house hunting and don't know if I will need certain things or not? Totally logical question. The keyword here is start. Okay. Now, the reason I'm making this the keyword is when I hear this, and I could be wrong on this, but when I hear this, what I'm thinking of is the plan. Okay. How hard is this going to be? Which when you're talking about house hunting, the idea of that is something that is completely overwhelming. Okay. So it is completely normal and logical and understandable to be thinking ahead. How is this actually going to play out? How is this going to work in my house with how things operate and how I function? Okay. So I totally get it. All right. And we're talking about a move and all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing. When I hear the word, how do I start? My mind goes to my own thing I have to be really, really careful of, which is trying to get everything figured out before I even start. Okay. That's my own thing I had to realize was a real bad thing that I used to do. Okay. That I still struggle with. I mean, it's just the reality. I want to figure it out before I do it. You guys, when I moved to Thailand, I read every single thing I could about Thailand. Like I did every bit of possible research. Of course, this was also 1997, so the internet was not exactly what it is right now, but if there was something on the internet, I had read it. I mean, like literally, I wanted to know everything just so I felt like I could go into this situation with as much information to help me be able to function within the situation. So I get it. Okay. I get this desire to know things beforehand. Unfortunately, my house, when I treated my house that way, it suffered for it. Okay. And I know that this is a unique situation. This is not a normal everyday thing. And yet still starting is the key. Okay. So the key word is start. Start with the easy stuff. All right. Start with the does. Since it's going to be the whole house, okay, that we're dealing with here, with house hunting, assuming you have the visible stuff taken care of to be able to sell it. If you don't have visible stuff taken care of, then you need to focus on visible before anything else. Because if you start with cleaning out a storage shed when you still have visible spaces completely covered in clutter, you're not going to be able to actually ever get to the point where you do sell your house. You see what I'm saying? You're going to keep pushing off this potential deadline again and again and again. See what I'm saying? So start with the visible stuff. Start with the easy stuff, the does. Start with the trash. Grab a black trash bag. If you're just completely overwhelmed and this is just something in the future, grab a black trash bag, start going through the house and throwing away trash, because it's going to really open your eyes to what all actually needs to be done. And it's going to get you moving and doing something that you're going to have to do anyway as you're figuring out what has to be done. Okay. Deal with easy stuff. Anything that is a duh. Okay. Give yourself permission to go ahead and go through your house and say, I'm going to just open either in the visible spaces or open spaces like closets and things like that, and say, I'm going to get rid of the easiest possible things here. Like the things that, of course, I'm not going to move that, like that don't make me think about it. I just go, okay, I'm going to fill up as many boxes as I can doing that. Okay. Always starting with the visible spaces. A duh might be the storage closet that's been nagging you because you don't actually need the stuff in it. Okay. So focus on that. Once you've got your visible spaces done, focus on that storage closet, because then that might give you the stuff that we totally use this all the time. And yet it doesn't need to be out and visible when we're selling the house. You free up that space so that you'll have a designated place where we're going to put that stuff right now while we're, selling the house, when we have to be able to, hide away certain things that we don't want to have out. All right. So let me talk about this one house. And y'all, this has been 265 podcasts. So there's a chance I've talked about this house before, but whatever. Anyway, there was a house that we looked at in our first house search. Like not like we've had very many. We've only owned 2 houses, but our first search for houses, we looked at one, and there were a lot of things about it that might have been positives. But of course, this was at the time where I personally was messy, but I assumed that was just because of my life circumstances, and I didn't think I was going to be messy anymore once I had a house, but whatever. Anyway, I just remember going, and the bathroom counters were covered in hairspray bottles and makeup and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like mine has been at different times. Okay. So I'm not saying that to criticize. What I'm saying is, if you're moving, you can live like that, and you probably have slob vision and your eyes wake up at random points and go, wait a minute, what in the world's going on here? But let moving be one of those wake up times where you look at spaces and you go, wait a minute, this can't all be out. Okay. Because as a buyer, I really did think, and there was a lot of stuff in that house anyway, but I really did think in my mind, even though I knew it wasn't even rational for me to be thinking it, I was like, I don't think they can ever get this house cleared out. Like those are the thoughts that went through my head. Like, I don't think I want to buy this house because I don't think they'll ever be able to get it cleared out. And so then we'd be stuck with all this stuff because there's no possible way somebody could get this cleared out. And here I am all these years later talking about my own clutter issues as for a living, but whatever. So yes, I was judging and I'm sorry. But meanwhile, my own apartment was a disaster back where I was living, but whatever. So my point is, if there are spaces like that, that's going to be something that you have to do anyway. Okay. You really, I mean, to stage a house, now we have all these shows about staging houses. That's reality that you're going to have to deal with that stuff anyway. So start with that. Okay. Because the temptation is to go, oh, well, I need to, start with the visible stuff, start with the obvious stuff that you maybe weren't seeing otherwise, and go, okay, for this time period, I'm going to have to pick my favorite hairspray and not have all 7 options out there. I'm going to have to, wear the same basic makeup palette. I don't actually use any makeup palettes, but anyway, I think that's what they're called. But I'm going to have to use these same basic things for this time period of my life. Okay. Like, this is just reality. That's how it's going to have to be. Okay. For this time period. So I might as well go ahead and either pack up if you have to keep it, or let yourself go, okay, where's the trash here? All right. Where's the easy stuff that actually doesn't even belong on this counter, but it just blended in with all the stuff that was there. So go ahead and follow those same basic principles and go ahead and start. And also think of that storage closet. Once you have the visible areas done, focus on that storage closet that you're pretty sure is full of stuff you don't need at all and that you really won't want to move. Get rid of that so you'll have room to put the things you do have to keep that, but everything's a container, because everything's a container, right? Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. Okay, here we go. Here's another one. I know you've mentioned not to pull everything out, but I plan to do a kitchen declutter soon, and I'd like a better idea of what I have with everything out. Would you recommend pulling one item out, example, a serving bowl, and then just go through all the cabinets looking for serving bowls only to pull out and make a decision, or designate a time block and go ahead and empty the cabinets completely? Okay, the sassiness is bubbling in me on this one, you guys. And I don't even remember who else said these. And I love my kindred spirits so, so much. And so you guys know, right? Okay, you guys, I have not mentioned to not pull everything out. I have said my method will never tell you to pull everything out. It's kind of like my big thing. Don't pull everything out. And so would I recommend to designate a time block and go ahead and empty the cabinets completely? No. The answer is no. No, I will never recommend that. But here's the thing. Do whatever you want to do. Like, if you want to do it, that's great. But I also know that I hear from people all the time who will say, I went ahead and pulled everything out because I was sure I had this amount of time. And the same thing happened that always happened, which is I got distracted and now I have this huge disastrous house. Okay, so I am never going to tell you to pull everything out. Okay, I'm never going to tell you to empty the cabinets completely unless you are wiping down the cabinets. And even then, I would say do one small section at a time and don't do them all at one time. Okay. If you want to wipe them down just to get away with this, whatever. But I am never going to tell you to pull everything out. Okay. So what do I recommend? I recommend following the process. Start with the easy stuff. Start with trash, easy stuff, does, and go item by item. Then, if you go through the process, the 5-step process that's in Decluttering at the Speed of Life and that I've talked about in all the podcasts, if you go through that process and you have already removed everything that either wasn't supposed to be in that cabinet, it's gone, okay, and it's in its home. You have removed anything that was like, I'm sorry, why did I even have this in there? Okay, this is trash. Or you have removed already the does, like that skillet that you cannot stand because it's impossible to clean and always burns things. Okay, I'm looking at you, cheap stainless steel. Anyway, but like once those things are out, once you have gone item by item and asked yourself the 2 decluttering questions, okay, those 2 decluttering questions have absolutely, they are not affected by whether or not you know everything that you have. Okay. Like those, they are not based on that. They are not based on you knowing and having a knowledge of everything that you have. They are based on that one specific item and whether you can answer those two questions or not. Okay. So do that. And then let's say that you've put skillets in the cabinet where you would look for skillets, and now they can't possibly fit. Okay, then you pick your best ones and you embrace the limits. You put everything together. That's part of the 5-step process, is consolidating, putting your skillets together, putting your saucepans together, putting all your forks together. That's part of it, but you're doing it within the space that you're going to be using anyway. Okay, now this is after you've already gotten all that excess stuff out of there. You put things together. If you put all your forks together in the fork slot of your, whatever that thing is called, in your cutlery drawer, silverware drawer, whatever, if you put them all in there and the drawer won't close, well, then you need to take out your least favorite ones until the drawer closes. Okay. So go ahead with the process. And then you tell me, the sassiness, y'all, I'm so sorry. I'm not usually this sassy on a Monday, but I guess that's what this week is going to be. I should probably let my husband know. Anyway, once you have gone through the process, if you still feel like I need to know everything that I have, pull it out. But you're going to have a whole lot less out than you do. And I'm still not telling you to pull it out. I'm only saying if you insist. If you want my recommendation, I'm going to say follow my process and don't pull everything out. My guess is that by the time you're through with the process, you are going to have a full awareness of everything that you have. You're also going to have a whole lot less overwhelming amount of stuff, and you're only going to have what you can handle if you've actually purged down to the limits of the container and the space that you have. Here's some other questions. I'm not for sure that these will have that same answer. Did the quarantine change any of your, which is my, grocery or pantry supply buying habits? Have you adjusted any of them back? They really did not change my pantry and grocery buying habits, other than the fact that I couldn't always get what I wanted to get. So sometimes I had to adjust according to, there was a time where it was really hard to find pasta. It was very difficult to find yeast. Not that I ever cook with yeast, but whatever. I wanted some. I finally got it once basically all bread baking energy was gone. Let's see. What are some other things? Meat. There was a time where there was a real meat shortage and you couldn't get that. So other than that, no, I actually, I have other podcasts where I've talked about my basic strategies of, keeping my pantry stocked, what I keep on hand all the time, how I pre-cook meats so that I can get meals done really quickly. Honestly, this just made me that much more thankful that I already operate my grocery pantry stuff that way anyway. I think it was either 31 or 41, but let's say 41 just to be a little more impressive. But I think it really was 41 days with no repeated meals in our house. And that's like cooking every day, except for Friday night and Thursday lunch. I'm pretty impressed with myself on that one. And lunches were not actually lunches were, everybody made their own meals. But I'm just saying for dinners, we did not repeat. And it was because I had my basics. I would throw this kind of pasta with that kind of meat, with that kind of sauce, make that whatever. And then sometimes I would do something, I know I made my chicken parmesan, which is a little more time intensive and effort intensive. I made that one night when I was like, okay, well, we had nothing else going on. So I spent 3 hours working on it in the kitchen, even though it doesn't really take that long. But, it was something I was like, I'm going to tackle something that I don't usually make. But because of that, then I was also really thankful for my nights when I didn't feel like cooking, but I could get a meal on the table because of, my pre-cooked meats and things like that. Okay. Question: how to manage when your container is larger than your clutter threshold? I often keep things that I don't use or need in closets on shelves since technically I have the room. Okay. This is a good question. And several people kind of chimed in on this, and we're talking about, I have a basement, which I'm jealous of you if you have a basement, or a storage room or whatever. Like they have, and I've heard this from several people who have land. It's like, well, I've got land. And so technically we do have, storage units or a barn or whatever. So we could keep everything. Couple things on this one. I don't think I'm going to be quite as sassy on this answer. I'm so sorry for my previous sassiness, but whatever. Okay. If you have a basement that you don't want to be a storage unit, okay, define that room. Maybe you have an idea of what you would like it to be, but remember my game room that I used to call my game room / office / guest room, because it was just kind of an all-purpose room. It's easy for a space like that is like, wow, I do have this extra space, for that space to feel like an all-purpose room. But then all-purpose room can also mean it doesn't have a definite purpose, which means I might as well stick stuff in there, which means it turns into a storage space. Okay. So defining those spaces and say, okay, what do I wish that this house had? I've heard the Nester talk about it. I've been following Young House Love on Instagram. And one of the things she was talking about recently was, how she loves hearing from people who are like figuring out what they really want in their home's function. Like what do they want? Like, we don't ever use this room, but we sure would like a room for such and such. We're going to redo this room and make it, so defining rooms. You've been in your house long enough now, or you were in your house for a long enough period to kind of know what it is your family needs. So defining those rooms so that if you stick stuff in there, you're sticking stuff in the kids' playroom, which makes it harder for it to be a playroom because it's got mom's random stacks of stuff in it. Okay, so defining those rooms will help with that. Another thing on that is ask the decluttering questions. Like going through the whole process, there's purpose in that. Ask the decluttering questions. Still go through the steps, okay? So yes, you have room for this stuff, and yet you're asking this question, and so you have frustration over the fact that these extra spaces are just filled with random stuff. Okay. So ask the decluttering questions. Those will weed out the random stuff. Okay. Go through the process. Go through the looking for trash. I'm going to look for trash. I am going to, easy stuff is putting stuff that's already established. It has a home. Okay. That doesn't really apply in this one, but you're still going to ask yourself that. Okay. So you're not accidentally just, oh, well, I've got a place and I have space, so I'm just going to stick this here. No. Ask yourself, does this already have a home? Take it there. Declutter things that you really just don't want. Give yourself permission to get rid of that. You don't have to keep it just because you have the room for it. Okay. And then ask the decluttering questions. Okay. Those same decluttering questions on all of your stuff. Now, it's preference. If you have this storage space and you can put all this random stuff there and it doesn't affect your life, go for it. Whatever, that's your house, it's your business. But if it's driving you crazy because you're like, that's just a bunch of junk in there, I don't even really need it. Technically, I have the room, but it drives me crazy knowing it's there. Well, then ask these questions. If I needed this item, where would I look for it first? If the answer isn't this random storage space, then that's not where it needs to be. It needs to be in the place where you would look for it first. Okay. If you can't answer that question, don't just go, oh, well, I guess I would look for it here then. If you literally cannot answer that question, where would I look for it first? Then ask yourself the second question. If I needed this, would it ever occur to me that I already had one? Okay. Because you didn't just say, oh, in this room. You could not answer that question. So then you have to admit that you would never go looking for it, which means you'd either do without or you'd go and buy another one. And then you'd have two. Okay. And then that's even more frustrating. So use those same questions, that same process to work through the stuff to get you to the point where do I need to keep this item or not? Now, the container concept, yes, it applies here in putting, once you have gotten rid of the stuff that you don't need in there, once things are in their actual home where you would look for it, instead of it just, because when it's just a random putting place, you can just randomly stick stuff in there, and then you might look in 2 or 3 places before you go look in that spot. You know what I'm saying? It needs to be in that first place where you would look for it. But go through the container, through the step 5, which is make it fit, which is to consolidate, put like things together. Just simply doing that. Okay, so we've gotten rid of everything that doesn't need to be in this room. I'm going to put all the like stuff together. Instead of it just being random, I'm going to put all of the I don't know, all of the accompaniment CDs from the 90s, from when I used to sing in church. I'm going to put all those in one spot. Okay. And just doing that will often trigger in your brain, oh yeah, I guess I don't need that many of those. Right. And again, maybe you get it down to the point where you go, oh, this room, really, I only need 2 shelves of this room that had 12 shelves in it. I only need 2 to actually store things. So maybe I could do something different with this room. Okay. And it'll open up that possibility for you to be able to then define the purpose of that room. All right. I'm going to stop there. I will talk to you guys next week.